Okay, here's the code I will be running for lab 4. Here you have all the variables we need. This is the button interrupt handler. So if button 0 is pressed, the amount of interrupts needed for the timer interrupt to trigger is incremented unless it is already at the max value of 7. And then the LED data is updated with this so that the LED will print out the new amount of interrupts needed, and the timer interrupt will count up from there. And then if button 1 is pressed, it decrements unless it's already at 1, then it stays at 1 because 1 is the lower limit. So it goes from 1 to 7, button 0 moving the timer interrupts needed up, and button 1 moving them down, or incrementing and decrementing. And then this is where you write out to the LED the new value. Or if they didn't change, it'll just, well, I guess the button 2 or 3 would trigger this, but the LED would just write out the same and nothing would change, at least on the hardware. The timer interrupt handler, the only thing changed from the base code that we used is this right here, the timer interrupts, instead of it just equaling 3, because it could equal anywhere from 1 to 7. So yeah, the reset routine, this doesn't work. Yeah, that's on me, obviously. The main code and the while loop is where the switch gets handled, so obviously you read the switch. If switch 2 is high, then you call the reset routine. I will show just that it breaks the code at the very end, so I don't have to rerun it, but I did not handle this correctly. I will talk about that why that is in the lab report. And then if switch 2 is not high, because I have switch 2 taking priority because it is a reset routine. If switch 3 is high, then the interrupt for the button interrupt is disabled, and then if it's not high or if it's low, it is enabled. So the default is for the button interrupts to be enabled, and you can turn them off by turning switch 3 on. And then the rest is the same as the tutorial code. So now I will run it. Run as launch on hardware. And here's the hardware. It starts counting. This is the timer interrupt. Every time it starts at 3, so the timer interrupt, once it triggers 3 times, it's going to increment the LED data and output it onto the LEDs. So button 1 is supposed to increment the LED or the timer interrupts needed for this to increment, and it'll output what it is. So it's currently at 3, so when I press this, it will output 4, which is that value, so I'm going to let it go past that. So now that's 4, and it's going to increment from there, so that's still the timer interrupt running, right? So it's going to count up from 4 because the timer interrupt value is stored as the LED data, and then the timer interrupts count up from that value. So if I hit this again, it's going to output 5, that's 5, and then it starts counting to there, 7, 8, and then I'm going to hit it and it's going to be 6 because it was 5 the last time. All right, I got unlucky with timing there because the interrupt went on. The timer interrupt went right as I hit it, so that's going to be 7, and I'm going to keep hitting that, and it's going to keep being 7 because we're on the upper limit. And it keeps going to 8 right away because the timer interrupt is hitting, and it's going to 8 because that is the value, that is what it's incrementing after that 7. So I'm going to hit this again, it's going to be 7, and it's going to go to 8. Okay, button 1 decrements it, so it's going to go to 7 here, or 6 because it was 7, right? So it's 6, so this is going to be 5. And again, got unlucky with timing on that. This is going to be 4, this is going to be 3, this is going to be 2, and now it's 1. See how it's counting up, counting down, and now if I put switch 3 high, the buttons do nothing. Switch it low again, buttons 2 and 3 do nothing. If I push them together, it is purely going to be whichever one is hit first gets triggered. And then I will break it with my button 2, or my switch 2. Nothing happens, turn it off, nothing happens. Thank you.